The greatest oriental poets, Rudaki, Firdousi, Dakiki and Omar Khayyam, described Bukhara using such epithets as noble and sacred. It is one of the oldest cities in Central Asia. Its age is at least 2,500 years. Bukhara itself differs from other cities in Central Asia with the fact that it is located on the same place where it was founded. Bukhara was never moved to any other place. This is its special feature. There are endless debates about the time of the appearance of Bukhara among historians as well as about the origin of its name. Some believe that it takes its roots in the Sogdian era and means God's charm. Other scholars claim that the name of the city comes from Sanskrit word Vihara, which translates as a Buddhist monastery. Speaking about the history of the appearance of Bukhara, experts often take the time of the appearance of the Ark fortress as a starting point. At first, this fortress was built, and then tribes of hunters, fishers, and farmers began to settle around it. The fortress is called Ark. It is translated into Russian as the Kremlin, the citadel, or the fortress. The total area is 4 hectares. The circumference of the walls of the fortress is 789 meters. The height of the walls in different places ranges from 16 to 20 meters. According to many legends, in the 7th-8th century BC, Ark was built by the legendary Siyavush, the son of the Iranian king Kayqavus. The research results suggest that the fortress was built in a later period. The age of its occurrence, according to our archaeologists, although the exact date has not been established yet, is the 4th century BC. Excavations revealed a 7-meter thickness of fortified walls made of paxa. That is, there was already a fortress in the time of Alexander the Great. From time immemorial, the main function of each fortress was to protect against enemy attacks, and many wars fell to Bukhara. But in addition to this, Ark also became a political center. It is here that the first residence of the Bukhara rulers appeared. The main source that tells us about the construction of the Ark is the famous work of the local historian Narsahi, according to which the Ark became an important center and cultural site of the Bukhara oasis during the reign of the Bukhara-Kudat dynasty.
Стал, значит, важным центром, важным историко-культурным местом Бухарского оазиса.
Over the course of hundreds of years of its existence, Ark was rebuilt several times, and sometimes even rebuilt all over again. For example, according to historical documents, in 1220 the fortress was almost completely wiped out by the army of the Mongol Emperor Genghis Khan. But despite all the trials, Ark for centuries continued to remain the center of political life, the heart of Bukhara. First, during the reign of Bukharkudates, then Samanids, Astrakhanids, Shaybanids, and Mangids, the fortress remained the residence of many ruling dynasties. During the reign of the Shaybanids, Bukhara became the capital of the state because under the Timurids it was a provincial city, and under the Shaybanids it acquired an important political significance, cultural significance. The appearance of the Ark fortress, preserved to this day, began to take shape in the 16th century, and the construction of buildings on its territory continued until the end of the 19th century. There were 2 pairs of gates. Some were in the west of the fortress, others in the east of the citadel. The latter have not survived to this day. In the towers above the western gate, which still exists today, at the usual time, a military guard carries its service, and on holidays musicians were stationed there. Indeed, right in front of the fortress was and still is located Registan Square, the epicenter of Bukhara's life.
Мы с вами находимся на высоте 16 метров от уровня
Right now,
площади.
we are at an altitude of 16 meters above the level of the square, which until 1920 was the main square of the city of Bukhara, and until the 1930s, it remained the main community center. In addition to this magnificent citadel, there were 2 madrasas, 2 mosques, a huge bazaar, and a parade ground for the occupation of the troops of the Bukhara emir. There was also a frontal place. And if an event was held on the square that required the presence of the leader of the state, he sat under this arbor on the wall.
Он находился вот под этой беседочкой на стене.
One of the most important structures of the Ark Fortress was Kurenish Khan. This is the hall which is also called the Throne or Coronation Hall. It was built in 1680 and has been preserved almost in its original form. It got its name because the coronation of the Bukhara emirs took place exactly here.
Вы видите трон бухарского эмира.
You see the throne of Bukhara emir. It's clear that this is not about the Shem chair, on which museum visitors are now taking pictures, but the emir's throne was this stone elevation, bounded on 4 sides by marble columns. This is the original of 1669.
В оригинале 1669 год.
Near the coronation hall is another courtyard called the Salam Khan. It means welcome hall. Here the rulers of Bukhara met important delegations from ambassadors of Emir Timur to diplomats of the Russian Empire.
Он очень небольшой, его никак невозможно.
It's very small. Cannot be compared with the throne yard, where we were before. But in terms of meaning, this yard will be more significant. Every morning, about 300 to 400 people from among his close ones came to this courtyard to greet him. And this was not a simple greeting. It was the time when the most important information from 27 regions of the Bukhara Emirate was given.
Век бухарского эмирата.
Starting from the 16th century, 3 mosques were built inside the Ark Fortress. One of them, the Jameh Mosque. It appeared during the reign of Amir Subhan Quli Khan. Its construction was completed in 1702.
С внешней стороны, с 3 сторон, эта мечеть окружена деревянным.
On the outside, on 3 sides, this mosque is surrounded by a wooden avon, and this avon rests on wooden columns. Both the columns and the ceiling itself are made of the most durable wood, elm. It's really very durable. Please note that all these columns are on marble bases, props, and this is no coincidence. The fact is that as soon as the elm tree comes into contact with the soil, it begins to rot.
С почвы он начинает гнить.
By the 10th century, Bukhara, which arose near the Ark Fortress, became one of the most developed settlements in the region, and many historical documents of that era, chroniclers call all of Central Asia Bukharia. At this time, the Silk Road was in its heyday, and ambassadors, traders, and craftsmen from both Asia and Europe were drawn into the settlement. The population of Bukhara was growing rapidly.
Кольцо рабатов постепенно развивается, и город уже...
The circle of Rabats gradually developed, and the city by the 12th century acquired a serious structure. The era of the Karakhanids, and then the era of Timur, the era of the Timurids, then the Shaybanids, Astrakhanids. The city is already developing, and today's appearance of Bukhara that we see, both architectural and structural, was basically laid down by the Shaybanids dynasty. This is the 16th century, and this structure has been preserved to this day, of course, with some additions and changes.
Конечно, с дополнениями, с изменениями.
Kalyan Minaret is one of the most important buildings of Bukhara. Translated from Persian, its name means Kalon. It is translated as large and powerful. It was no coincidence that such a name was given to the minaret, built in the early 12th century near the Ark Fortress. For its time, it became the tallest building in the Muslim East.
Минарет Калон – это самый большой минарет.
Kalon Minaret is the largest minaret in Central Asia. Its height is 46 meters. It was built in the 12th century, during the reign of the Karakhanid dynasty and Arslan Khan. This minaret was built in 4 years.
Этот минарет был построен в течение 4 года.
to build the tower was given by the ruler of the Karahanid dynasty, the Turkic Khagan Arslan Khan Muhammad. The process was led by architect Usto Bako. One of the legends says that because of the architect, the construction of the minaret was interrupted for a long time.
Мастер Наджмиддин Бако, он был очень известным бухарским мастером.
Master Usta Boko was a very famous Bukhara master.
Этого нашего большого минарета состоит из
He
горных
first laid the foundation of our large minaret.
чтобы крепко держать сам
It
минарет.
consists of mountain stones in the form of a pyramid to hold the minaret firmly. But when he finished this foundation, he escaped from the city and hid. 2 years later, the master returned to the ruler Aslan Khan and said, if someone wants to build something powerful, something big, the foundation must settle within 2 years.
Построить что-то могущественное, что-то большое здание. Фундамент должен был в течение 2 года осидеть или осесть.
Since ancient times in many states and almost all continents of the planet, buildings have been created that should, according to the intention of the creators, eclipse everything that has existed before. But not all grandiose structures manage to pass the test of time, in contrast to the Kalan minaret.
Просуществовал 800 лет, несмотря на сколько землетрясений, он стоит до сих пор.
It existed for 800 years. Despite so many earthquakes, it still stands. The foundation is lowered to a depth of 16 meters. An astringent solution is clay loam soil. It is a washed clay. Ash goes on the surface, then gunch is added.
Вяжущий материал является там ганч.
إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل.
With the commissioning of the Kalan minaret, it performed several functions. It was an observation tower, and the decrees of rulers were announced from there to the residents of the city. And of course, worshippers were called for prayer.
Все остальные домыслы, что оттуда
All
сбрасывали
other
людей,
conjunctures that people were dumped from there are fantasy. There are no documents to prove that. They couldn't do that from a place from where they called worshippers for prayer.
этого не могло быть.
Over time, the Kalan minaret has acquired crucial importance not only in the religious and political life of Bukhara. It became an architectural dominant in the appearance of the city, and subsequent rulers created other places of worship nearby that can be on a par with its grandeur.
Вокруг него потом создается уже ансамбль. Сперва это был...
Then an ensemble was created around it. It is written in the chronicles that at first the wooden structure of the cathedral mosque was built, and then already in the 15th century, a large cathedral mosque called Majdi Kalan appeared near Minari Kalan. Minari Kalan means Minar the Great, and Kalan means the Great Mosque. The date of construction of the Kalan Mosque is 1514. It became one of the largest in Central Asia, yielding only to the Bibi Khanum temple, built in Samarkand by Mir Timur a few years earlier. Historians are convinced that Kalan was erected on the site of another mosque, built during the life of Arslan Khan, the creator of the minaret.
Она построена, вот эта мечеть, которая
This mosque, which we see today, was built in the foundation of an old mosque which existed in the 12th century, 12,000 worshippers. The name of the builder of the mihrab, the main part of the mosque, was preserved, and the master's name is Kuranay.
мастер Рустов строил ее.
20 years later, in 1536, the Poikalan ensemble is complemented by another building. This is the Miri Arab Madrasa. Its construction is connected with the name of the ruler, Ubaidullah Khan. Back then, he transferred the capital of his kingdom from Samarkand to Bukhara and actively took up the development of a new political center of the state.
Возникает в XVI веке, уже при эпохе династии шейбанидов, правителей Бухары, медресе
It
Мири
occurred
Араб.
in the 16th century during the era of the Shaibanid dynasty, the rulers of Bukhara and Miri Arab Madrasa. It is a large madrasa on the podium. It is made in the canonical style of such an institution, with a lecture hall, with a mosque inside, with cells, hujras for students, with a special architectural color, with a set of mosaics, decor, and so on.
Колоритом с набором мозаики, декора и так далее.
Despite the fact that all Poi Kalyan structures look like they're of the same age, the formation of the ensemble has been going on for centuries, and the finishing touch was made by historical standards not so long ago, only about 100 years ago, during the reign of Sayyid Alim Khan. In 1915, the last emir of Bukhara built the madrasa of Amir Alim Khan. He wanted to build an academy where they would study not only theological sciences but also secular sciences, history, geography, and so on, to make sure that Bukhara had real scientists who were here back in the 9th, 10th centuries. The monuments of the ensemble Poi Kalyan are rightfully considered to be the pearls of Central Asian architecture. They're included in the UNESCO World Heritage Fund, and for many decades they have attracted the close attention of scientists and tourists around the world.
Well, actually, everything is so great, and I'm very inspired. And we're at the Kalyan Mosque, and it's really great to see everything here. Everything here. Why I would recommend Uzbekistan to my friend? First of all, it's very cheap, to be honest. Very cheap comparing to all Europe. And of course, it's very interesting. It's so unique and so ancient architecture and lifestyle. It's very interesting.
It's very impressive. I mean, we see a lot of buildings and impressions which we have to digest still. Yeah? So it's a very nice town. So I think a lot of vivid and architecture. We've seen other towns in between which are not so old like this place here. So it's very impressive.
Labi Khaus ensemble, located in the center of Bukhara, is considered to be a monument of the 17th century, although in fairness it should be noted that the first construction of the complex was erected in 1569. This is the largest madrasa in the city, bearing the name of Kulbaba Kukildash, in honor of a politician, commander and poet of the Bukhara Emirate. And after a while, the state authorities decided to build an entire architectural complex here. During that period of time, it was flourishing. The Silk Road still did not end at the beginning of the 17th century. The construction began. Divan Begi, at the time it was the chairman of the government, decided to build the first Hanako. What is Hanako? This is the house of the Sufis. At the same time, with the construction of Hanako, a pond was erected by Divan Begi. Such man-made water reservoirs in Uzbekistan are called khaus. The name Labi Khaus can be translated as near a reservoir. For Bukhara, located in the Kızılkum Desert, it was not only beautiful but also a functional, strategically important element of the urban landscape.
У нас чувствовался проблема воды.
Of course, for a long time we felt the problem of lack of water. Because of this, the rulers of our city over the past millennia throughout the city built 100 of such ponds to store water.
Таких прудов для воды, для хранения воды.
The last building of the Labi Khaus ensemble was the Divan Begi Madrasa, built in 1623. It is noteworthy that it was originally built as a caravanserai, a structure that served as a shelter and parking for travelers, most often for numerous merchants who traveled down the Silk Road. The mosaic that adorns the main entrance of the madrasa is of particular interest. Interestingly, you will not find images of animals on other monuments of Bukhara, except for Abdul Ishan. The image on the entrance depicts the human-faced sun, to which two birds, clawing animals, are striving. The striving of the birds for the sun means piety. The claws of animals means the onset of the spring equinox, the start of Nowruz holiday. The Labi Haus architectural ensemble was completed in 1623. Both the buildings themselves and the pond were preserved almost intact, except that the fountains were installed in the pond in the last century. To this day, this is one of the favorite places to relax, both for citizens and for many tourists. At the beginning of the 20th century, the once independent and powerful state fell under the control of the Russian Empire. Moreover, the emir ruled his country as an absolute monarch. In that political situation, there were other pluses. The rulers no longer needed to spend money on weapons, on the maintenance of the army and border protection. Therefore, they raised the question of building a new residence, since the Ark fortress no longer corresponded to the trends of modern times. The place for the palace was chosen by Seyyid Ahad Khan, the father of the last emir of Bukhara. In 4 places of Bukhara, carcasses of lamps were hung up, and only in this place did the lamp not deteriorate in the summer, and in other places it deteriorated. Ahad Khan gave the command to start the construction there. The selected location was 4 kilometers from Bukhara. A significant area, more than 10 hectares, was allocated for the construction of the palace. This garden looked like Timurid gardens. It had the appearance of a charbagh, that is, a 4-terminal network. More than 200 species of fruit and ornamental trees and flowers were planted in it. After the death of his father in 1911, Seyyid Alim Khan ascended the throne of the Bukhara Emirate. The best architects of the state got together to build the residence. Since the ruler lived in St. Petersburg for several years when he was young, he decided to move away from the architecture familiar to Central Asia. The appearance of the palace corresponded to 2 architectural styles, Oriental and European architecture. The design of the palace was made by Russian architects Margulis and Sakovich, but only Bukhara masters participated in the construction, and the chief master of the palace, the famous master engraver Usta Shirin Muradov, led the construction. The new residence of the emir was called Sitorai Mohi Hoas, which means palace like the stars and the moon. Among its many rooms, the Honai Sadeh throne hall, the white room, stands out the most. Usto Shirin Muradov was engaged in the creation of its unique look. A monument dedicated to him was installed near the palace. He molded patterns from gypsum, never once copying any of them. Work on the design of the hall took 2 years and was completed in 1915, after which the room became a reception room. Here, Seyyid Alim Khan welcomed foreign ambassadors and arranged balls. If we talk about the buildings of the residence, the main ones were the reception room, hotel, bedroom, and haram khana, that is, rooms for women and children. For haram khana, the house in which the emir's wives and concubines lived, a special place was chosen. It was near the haus. Access to the building according to Sharia law was banned for absolutely all men except the ruler himself. The wives lived on the first floor of the house and the concubines on the second. This one here is a unique building for the emir's throne. The emir's throne stood there, and after a working day he sat there and rested. And when the emir sat on the throne, his concubines bathed in this pond. More than 40 concubines swam here and delighted the eye of the emir himself. The construction of the palace was completed in 1918, but Seyyid Alim Khan could not fully enjoy it. After the 1917 revolution, the ruler was forced to flee, first to the east of the Bukhara Emirate and then to Afghanistan. According to legend, the once powerful statesman died in complete poverty, bequeathed to write on his grave the following words: "The emir without a homeland is miserable and insignificant. A beggar who died in his homeland is truly an emir." Bukhara is often called an open-air museum, which is not surprising. It's one of the oldest and largest cities in Central Asia. For many centuries, it played a key role in the history of civilizations, repeatedly being the capital of the states that were formed on the territory of modern Uzbekistan. Every year, The interest towards Bukhara and its unique architectural monuments is growing. Hundreds of thousands of people flock to the city to feel the breath of history. And Bukhara to this day bears the title of the Pearl of the East.